Hello, friends. I am Tyro Inchoate. Today...
Screw you! And screw you too!
Omae. What's wrong?
This guy's being stupid on the internet!
Yes, that is a frequent occurrence. How do you plan to deal with it?
I'm gonna smear him across social media and have a live stream where I scream over him incoherently for hours. Then I can declare victory over their online corpses.
I think you should reconsider that. It may be good to review best practices for handling internet conflict. Let's start with the general kinds of online conflicts a person can run into. You have insults, slights, misrepresentations, unfulfilled promises, harassment, threats, and doxing. Insults are the oldest type. Trolling uses this sort of conflict all the time. Any kind of active provocation falls into this category. Slights are the opposite of insults. Instead of offense stemming from what is said, instead it comes from what is not said. Not giving someone a hangout link for a stream when they've been a regular multiple times. That could be perceived as a slight.
A misrepresentation is when one party thinks you're going to give them one thing, but you give them something else. Like if you say, you'll share someone's video with a lot of friends, but you end up sharing only with 2 people. 2 is not a lot, so you have misrepresented the quantity. Closely related are unfulfilled promises. In this case, they think you're gonna give them something, but actually they get nothing. This is saying you're gonna share someone's video with friends, but instead, don't share it with anyone. Or, if you promise to promote them to another YouTuber, but don't mention them at all.
Harassment, sexual or not, is unwanted attention. If you're messaging someone a dozen times an hour without reply, you are likely harassing them. Closely related are threats. Many harassers, if they get no response, will begin to make verbal threats against their target. In most cases, these threats can be laughed off. No one should take an internet tough guy seriously.
However, one of the very worst things is doxing. Doxing is a type of threat, but one so awful it deserves its own category. It is the threat of having your anonymity stripped away. Commonly used for blackmail, it's a tactic used by people who want you to feel threatened offline. Obviously, you can't dox public figures, whose information is already widely known. And if a person chooses to reveal information about themselves, it's not doxing to reference or spread that info. But most people online are not public figures, and anonymity keeps them safe.
The type of conflict you find yourself embroiled in will inform how you approach it. Doxing is serious enough that I won't cover it here. That deserves its own video. But you should go to the police if you are doxed, and make sure you have your address whitelisted to avoid swatting. We'll focus here on the lesser conflict forms.
Insults, slights, misrepresentations, and unfulfilled promises can all be solved in similar fashion. Harassment and threats are a bit stronger, so there are fewer solutions. We'll cover them separately towards the end.
There are some good general rules to remember when conflict arises. The first is to assume good faith. The people we interact with the most will tend to be who we have disagreements with. Those people can loosely be called our friends. You should try and grant them the benefit of the doubt. Don't start out by assuming they mean to hurt you or mean to do bad things to you, not unless you have hard evidence otherwise. Doing this will keep your emotions in check and allow for better dialogue. Speaking of which, emotions can run very hot on things like this. It's normal to feel angry, sad, disgusted, or even afraid. When conflict comes, understand that emotions will not make things better or solve the problem. This is the second rule. Set aside your emotions as best you can to see things clearly. Definitely don't react when your feelings are pumping. It can feel like that's the right course. The energy will tell you to. That is a false sensation. Also check yourself and your environment for stressors. Have you been having a bad time at work? Relationship issues? Are you eating healthy? There are a number of things that could cause you to be overreacting. Try to reduce unrelated causes of emotional instability before you tackle the conflict.
Take a deep breath, step away from the internet for a bit, do something relaxing or fun to take your mind off, like playing Warhammer, or painting Warhammer, or reading up on Warhammer lore, or drawing Warhammer fan art, or writing Warhammer fanfic.
Okay, waifu, we get it. The emotions will try to rush you to conclusions. Instead, do the opposite. This leads to the third rule. Ask questions. How did it end up like this? Who said what to who? In what order were things done and said? Is this recurring or new? Gather facts, screenshots, and other pieces of evidence. Make sure what you're saying is rooted in reality and not faulty memories.
Miscommunication is the most common cause of issue. The fourth rule is to review your past messages about the matter. Check for misspoken words or bad syntax. Maybe you phrased something wrong, or maybe they did. Did you base a conclusion on rumors instead of a promise? Text does not communicate tone. Maybe you read something one way when it was meant another. Were they attempting humor and you took it seriously? Did they mean to be aggressive, or did they just choose their words purely? Reread what was said and try to think of other ways it could have been intended. Then ask yourself if that could have been more likely.
The last rule, and one of the harder ones, is to accept you may be wrong. No one likes to admit they messed up, but eventually everyone will mess up. Understand that this may be your turn. If you assume you must be right, that arrogance will lead you astray.
Arrogance is a stupid emotion for fat, ugly men with bad accents. God damn it!
Self-doubt will make you more open to listening to the other side, though too much will leave you open to gaslighting. That's why you need to carefully review what was said and when. You want to be sure of the facts, even if you're not sure of the motives and intent.
Okay, so I've calmed down, reviewed everything, and found a couple of things where I'm unsure what happened. Now what do I do?
When dealing with insults, slights, and the rest, the first step to resolving any disagreement will be talking to the person yourself. Do so in private, such as through Twitter, Discord, or some other communication source. As mentioned before, don't do this when your emotions are hot. Calm down first. But don't wait too long. You don't want bad feelings to fester.
Your goal in discussing things one-on-one is to try and understand what the other person meant. If it was an insult, did they mean it to be an insult or a joke? If it was a slight, did they do it on purpose or did they simply forget? With misrepresentation and unfulfilled promises, check if they understood what you wanted in the first place. They may have been unclear on what they were supposed to do. Maybe they thought they did what you asked, or did nothing because they were awaiting further instruction.
When you have the one-on-one, it's important not to do it only by text. Try to use camera or voice, if at all possible. Text does not convey the full range of emotion needed for this exchange, and you may end up misreading the intent of the other party, making it worse. Audio, or even better, video, lets you gauge tone and avoids that. Only use audio and video with someone you trust with that. And remember that while you should assume good faith, the other side may record you.
You're going to want to hear the other person say they're sorry. If the animosity is on both sides, both of you will be expecting the other person to say sorry first. Instead of waiting, be the first to say sorry. Identify something you did wrong, even something minor, and apologize for it. Do this relatively early too. Or pull their pants down and ravage them. Rawr. With consent, of course.
That will change the tone from one of wanting to blame the other party to acknowledging the errors made. This disarms one of the big obstacles, defensiveness. If you go in guns blazing and making accusations, you will cause the other person to focus on justifying what they did, on deflecting blame from themselves instead of reflecting on what happened. By being the first one to admit fault, you will lower the need to find justification. It will make it more likely that the other person will also apologize for what they did wrong, and that, in turn, will lead to the matter being amicably settled.
Okay, I apologize, but all they did was agree that it was my fault and they didn't say anything about what they did. I hate them even more, and I want to smear them on the internet now. Wait, I know this is scripted, but this seems familiar.
Hold on. Before you go that route, consider bringing in a third-party mediator, someone outside the conflict who can help give both you and them a fair view on what transpired. This should be someone you can both trust. Share whatever material you have on the matter with the third party so they can see things from both sides. Then let them guide both of you through what they see as the core problem at hand. If you don't feel you'd be particularly good at a one-on-one resolution, you could skip directly to doing this.
Selecting a good mediator is important. Don't just pick someone you're both friendly with. To be a good mediator, they have to be calm, logical, and able to put aside personal bias. You don't want someone who'll say, "This is what happened because I say so." You want someone who can explain to both of you what went wrong in clear terms. The mediator should be assumed by both sides to have their best interest in mind, or to at least care that you and the other person are fighting, and want to see it end. You don't want a prima donna who will make it all about themselves. You know who you are.
Having a mediator helps further undo the defensiveness mentioned before. Perhaps you tend to be a bit accusatory, or you let your anger out too fast. Letting the other person hear from a more neutral-sounding source can help them feel more open. They may find a better way of describing the issue, or be able to focus on the true underlying issue you could have both missed.
If you and the other person can't decide on just one person to help, gathering several could work. This is known as group mediation, also known as hippie drum circles or pot sharing. Bring together a small team with different perspectives to look over things and provide judgment. You can also do this if the single mediator you bring has difficulty figuring out what's happening.
Be careful with this option. The more people you involve, the more likely things could get out of hand. The last thing you need are rumors and gossiping behind your backs. More people means more risk of that. At most, maybe include up to 3 people.
Each person you add should have the same positive traits as the single mediator, but including people with different approaches to interpersonal situations is not a bad idea. The mediators didn't help. He refuses to listen to reason. Now what?
That brings us to the very last option, going public with the disagreement. When should you move a conflict to the public sphere? In short, you shouldn't.
If a disagreement is already public from the beginning, you can be forced to deal with it in front of everyone. But very rarely is it a good idea to turn a private disagreement into a public one.
When you make something open, you're inviting the court of public opinion. That court can go 3 ways, 2 of which are bad for you. 1, you're right and the other person is wrong. 2, you're wrong and the other person is right. 3, both of you are idiots. Why choose a path where you have a 66% chance of looking like a fool?
With a few exceptions, nearly all disagreements can be forgiven in time. But if you thrust it into the spotlight now, you're mixing pride into the mix. The other person may be less likely to move on because now they will appear weak in front of others. So what could have been something forgotten in a few months can drag out for years, or even get worse.
In a private setting, you have much more control over who to bring in. As mentioned with third-party and group mediation, you need to be careful about who you choose. You want people of even temperament who won't exploit the conflict for personal gain. But now you're in the open, and lots of those people are going to latch on. Once people with a vested interest in perpetuating the drama worm their way in, things will only escalate.
They are sharks, drawn to the smell of Internet Bloodsports, but more parasitic, like lampreys.
Since those people want the feud to grow worse, they will egg on both sides. They'll actively oppose any kind of peaceful resolution. They may even try to drag in unrelated third parties to spread the drama further and raise the stakes. This is how an argument over something as simple as a forgotten invitation can devolve into a career-ending screaming match.
This is not the same as debating a topic with someone publicly though. Public disagreement on an issue is fine and entertaining. The good kind of open arguments are between people of different ideas having a good back and forth.
Personal matters are what you should avoid making a spectator sport. In the end, if mediation fails, instead of going public, just forget about it. Why waste time getting emotional about something on the internet? If there was actual money involved, look into a civil court resolution. Short of that, it's better to move on and not deal with that person anymore.
Those recommendations are great for low-level issues, but what about harassment and threats? Is it axe sharpening time yet?
No. With harassment and threats, several of the earlier assumptions don't apply. You don't need to assume good faith for one, nor is it usually a case of misunderstanding.
Saying, "I'm gonna break your legs," isn't a phrase that gets misunderstood.
You should still set aside your emotions and ask questions. If they're harassing you, what is their goal? Do they simply want attention? Are they trying to drive you off the internet? Do they think it will get you to like them? Asking them to stop is a good first step. Sometimes that will even work. If it continues, block them across the board. Check on the privacy settings of your media accounts for how to do this.
If it's threats, how likely are they to carry them out? How much do they really know about you? Can you dismiss them and laugh? Or do they pose an actual serious risk? If it's a legitimate threat, go to the police or the FBI. Otherwise, this is one case where going public is not a bad idea. Mocking the person who threatened you openly and loudly, turning them into a laughingstock, will often shut them up. If they know threats do nothing to rattle you, they will stop, because it's the only tool they have.
I hope that clears everything up, waifu.
Yes, it did. Thanks, you love. That guy from before is being stupid again.
What's he saying now?
He's insulting my accent and calling me stupid.
That's all right, dear. No need to drag yourself into a public forum over that. I'll just nuke him from orbit. See? Conflict resolved. Simple and clean.
You're the best, darling. Smooches, kawaii.
Thank you. Until our paths cross again, farewell.
One of the best videos I have seen on the internet, Tyro.
And a solemn warning to you all. Don't go on the Snatchcast.
It's too small to matter, but just big enough to cause problems. Like Smeagol's penis.